underground.
Welcome to the show. So if you guys didn't notice, we are on a very different platform than usual. Where are we right now?
We're on Utreon.
So I will tell you guys a little story about why that is. So
fuck YouTube.
On, I think it was Sunday, I check my notifications in the YouTube studio for Out of Battery. And we have a community guidelines strike warning. And the warning says that we were being naughty boys discussing firearms. Okay, fair enough. We're worried that it might be linking to any other sites. So we go and we expunge all the links. A day passes. We're feeling good. Warning is okay. It's not a strike, you know, not the end of the world. Tuesday happens. On Tuesday, we get an actual strike for a totally different video, completely unrelated. They're very random videos as well. So I don't really know how the YouTube people decided which ones we were being too naughty on. But they chose episode 6 of season 1, which was AG's episode, and Anatomy of a Stick Mag for whatever reason. So there we go. Can't talk about what goes on inside of a stick magazine
because we were being naughty on all the videos. They just only had to watch those 2.
Don't say that too loud later. They're gonna hear. So a side effect of a strike is for the first strike, you can't use YouTube at all for a week. So right now we are in the naughty period until next Tuesday.
Hey,
so on Tuesday, assuming nothing goes wrong, we will start streaming on YouTube again, but we are rabidly looking for alternatives, you know what I mean? And because we've now, you know, YouTube has decided that we're notable enough to be canceled, dude, I figured we should start wearing suits. We're like late night TV show hosts now, dude. We've made it.
You know what? Something that we've missed here, Cape, right?
We're
not streaming on YouTube right now, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Does Utreon participate in censorship?
Oh, dude. I hadn't thought about this, but we're ready to go now, dude. This is actually extremely underrated. Why are we not doing this every day? Holy shit. That feels good, dude. I want to hold guns on stream.
Oh, amazing.
So,
no, it is a functional firearm.
This is not a functional.
So, on the note of people getting canceled, I want to talk a little bit about what's new in GunCAD this week. Cancellation, dude, because PSR, who is by a fucking mile the biggest YouTuber in GunCAD, he just made an Instagram post saying that he was packing it up and taking it to, where was it, Rumble? Dude.
The notoriously far right, but a lot more open video platform.
Okay.
You can talk about firearms, you can show firearms, you can even show assembly and things like that. And unless you're like actively making a bomb or something that's illegal, you're good.
Okay, dude. So at some point we'll look into dual streaming. Mr. Snow was telling me about how we might go about doing that. So hopefully we can look into that in the future. But for next week, it'll probably be just YouTube again. How are we feeling tonight, boys?
Feeling a little spicy.
I'm feeling good. So how about you guys? How about we bring the guest on? Does that sound good? So if you guys, are illiterate or something and didn't read the title, the guest tonight is IvanTheTroll. So without further ado, welcome, Ivan.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
Excellent.
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. I spent today playing around on my four-wheeler and shooting. It was kind of fantastic. The weather was like a mid-50s, so perfect sweater weather. It was nice.
Are you a big motorsports guy? I think I remember you saying on the last episode that you got into 3D printing to mod your dashboard of your car. So I guess that makes sense that you'd be
more for restoration side in that particular instance, though. But I guess I am mechanically savvy, or whatever the word for that is, right? So when I turned 18, I think I mentioned I bought that Corvette that ended up becoming a little bit of a money pit, but now it's it was a fucked over race car before, but now it's my fucked over race car, and it makes the sounds that I want it to make, and so it's fantastic, and I love it. But no, I wouldn't describe myself as a motorsports person per se, because like actually the guy who I bought the Corvette from had been in a full body cast twice in his life because he was a dirt biker.
Shit.
Yeah, he messed himself up badly on a dirt bike, and so I don't want to go on like the 2-stroke 70 miles an hour on a dirt bike. That just seems like a recipe for ending up in a full body cast twice.
Yeah.
So that much isn't for me. But I've got a range, the range I test and shoot stuff at. I don't have to get in the car to go drive to it. I usually walk, but anytime that I've got like 4 or 5 guns I want to shoot, I'm not walking with 4 or 5 guns because that's a pain. So the little four-wheeler that I've got is essentially just a gun caddy. I've got rifle bags strapped to it, and so I can load up my 4 or 5 guns and as much ammo as I need or want to shoot, and then scoot on over there on the scooter. And then the best thing about it, and I guess I had never realized this, is like it's got the hunting racks or whatever on the back end, was the option Polaris called it. But that's like it's a mobile gun bench at that point. Like you can put all your guns on the back of the four-wheeler and then load mags off of it, and then so you don't have to put guns on the ground. It's very, very nice and convenient. And
have you ever used it as like a rest?
Constantly. I did sometimes whenever I'm bored, or like imagine, of course, here comes my my private range privilege, right? It's coming out. I'll call out my own privilege. But you'll get bored just shooting normally, like shoot at 100 yards, shoot at 25 yards, whatever. So you'll do like your own 2-gun action challenge stuff. So one of the ones I do is I start at 25 yards, run the steel with the pistol, then hop on the four-wheeler and book it back to 100, and then resting off of the four-wheeler, run the targets with the rifle. And so I've done stuff like that before, which is a lot of fun.
See, my most exotic experience with that kind of stuff is using a kid's treehouse. Then you really have to police the grass. So the owner of the property gets a little pissed off.
Right. What kind of Nerf battles were these kids having? Oh, East St. Louis Nerf battles. Cool.
So I'm going to start us off where we left off last time. So last time we were on slide 20 of the slideshow, and I'm just going to bring the slideshow back in on slide 21. So talk to me a little bit about what's going on in this picture, because this it's an interesting one.
I'm going to tell the whole story because that'll be fun. So you late one night on the Discord call with the homies, and we were sitting there talking about guns that we wanted to build, and usually we do things like people will join this Discord call, right, that like are outside of the homie circle, and we'll try and convince them to buy a bad gun or terrible people. But like that, like there was a guy who really wanted an M1A, and then we're trying to convince him to buy a Draco because a Draco's better than an M1A in every single possible metric, which is probably more not ironic than it is ironic.
Yeah.
In the end of the day. But so we were sitting there doing our usual bullshitting, and Matt from Fudbusters was on the call, and he was like, "Ivan, you should make something that that uses the set me parts kit. And I'm like, no, that's stupid. I don't want to do that. And so he essentially like eggs me on saying like, oh, okay, but like if you were to design it, like how would you even hold like the barrel and trunnion in the gun? There's like no good way to do that. And I'm like, I designed something that clamshells around the hourglass shape of the trunnion, whatever. And so over the span of like maybe 30 minutes to an hour, he ends up having me inadvertently design this entire gun just like by answering all of his questions. Because he's like, well, how would you solve this? And I'm like, I do it like this. I do flanges, mount multiple parts together. You can make it stiff enough at the front end. It's going to be stiffer than the original, so it'll at least be as accurate as the originals. And so then by the end of it, I'm like, I've designed this entire gun already by now, haven't I? And so we sort of realized, yes, we've done that. And so I hop into CAD and he pulls a couple measurements off of, he had a flat as well as the parts kit, as well as a complete, I think one of the Greek contract G3s. And so, he pulled some measurements off of that stuff. And then I think I did two revisions past that point just for fitment. And then at that point I went and fired it, even though it was a 2-wall, 20% infill. So that's the top 3 guns there are the children of that Discord call, where it's 308 caliber, set me Model C. For the uninitiated, the set me Model C is the grandparent or the parent of the German G3 that everyone's familiar with from video games. And this gun descended from the set me 58, which descended from some sort of prototype gun that didn't really go anywhere. It descended from the Nazi designed STG 46. So at the end of World War II, the Nazi engineers realized they couldn't stay in Germany anymore because they were going to get in big trouble. So they went to their best buddies who were also fascists in Spain and were like, you're going to give us asylum and we'll make guns for you. And so they did. And that's sort of where these guns came from. But the top one there is an 18-inch build with the original sort of set me stock. Is a part of the beta test for the 3D printable set me. And I think I didn't mention its name is the Amigo Grande, being that it's Spanish and it's big. We figured we'd butcher some Spanish and call it something that it sounds like you'd order at Starbucks. But the second one there is a 16-inch build with a more aggressive muzzle brake, sort of a more gamer build. But in the beta for that, somebody designed their own 3D printable spur style stock. And for those who don't know what that is, the Swedish military has used the G3 for a long time now, and they were looking at, they knew they needed a gun that could take optics, and they knew they needed a gun with an adjustable stock, and they were looking at like buying new ones. And then there was a guy by the last name of Spur in Sweden who was like, hang on, what you can Sweden? I no, it's not Sweden. Maybe it's Swiss. It's one of those 2 made up countries that don't exist in Europe. But the guy was like, I can design you an adjustable stock and an optics mounting platform and great optics for this gun, and you can keep using them. And sure enough, he did. And it essentially brings the stock in line with the recoil, which makes the gun so much more comfortable to shoot. It's night and day how much better it is. And as well as it's just kind of a cool look. And so a guy in the beta more or less copied it, but made the design much better for 3D printing. And so that came out of there. And so I've got that on that sort of more gamer build. And then the third build is something I made intentionally to be obnoxious.
It's my favorite one.
I had an unpleasant run-in with my neighbors after I moved in, and I mean, I was not planning on shooting them. I'll mention that now. But they threatened that they were going to have parties so loud they were going to force me to move out, and so I was like, I'm going to make something that's louder than your parties could ever be. So of course that's going to be an 8-inch barrel 308.
That seems like it would suck very badly to shoot.
It's not great. Even so I put that giant like hand stop on the front of it because like I was not going to risk a hand stop on that breaking or deforming because that's a lot of muzzle to have your hand in front of.
Yeah.
And so even with your hand behind that hand stop, you'll lose hair off your fingers, and it's between every shot, all it is muzzle flash. If you shoot it anytime after the sun has started setting, you can't see your target, so you're snow blinded or whatever. It's kind of miserable, but it's cool. And then I got lots of upvotes on Reddit because people thought it was hilarious. Because admittedly, it takes a 308. Which is something that normally has a muzzle energy like 5 to 10 times what a 9mm does, and it brings it down to something that's just twice the muzzle energy of a 9mm from the same length barrel even. So it becomes a noisemaker. It makes a lot of noise and a lot of muzzle flash, and there's also a 308 that barely leaves the barrel. But that was that, and that's more or less the same thing as the Amigo Grande, just with the shorter barrel, and then a handguard I made that has a hand stop to avoid like doing bad stuff. And then on the bottom there, we've got a couple of printed MP5s. That was a project that, so once we realized we could print the 308s, the question that next hit my mind is, why don't I do this with an MP5? And so I went and shopped around and eventually found out, like, yeah, you can, if you press and pin your own barrel, you can be building an MP5 for like $600-700. And at the time I was like, that's so much money to spend on a printed gun. And then I went and built my first one, and I was like, oh, holy cow! This is incredible. It's the HK people who look down their noses at the and of course I can now join them in saying, like, the poor blowback, which is direct blowback, but we call it poor blowback now. That the people who still insist on running poor blowbacks, they don't know what they're missing. Where roller delayed blowback is actually as fantastic as the HK snobs say. And so I built a couple of the MP5s at this point, and I've got a couple more I'm building. I guess I'll say it here. I'm working on a short one, and I'm working on one that's bigger and more different. But so I've got, I'm down the MP5 rabbit hole. It's a lot of fun. And of course, people have complained, like, but it's expensive. But the easy counter is like, well, everything that's good in life is expensive. You can't expect to buy $200, $300 Glock builds and then have all the fun in the world. But that's pretty much the MP5s. Is you can look down your nose at the other 3D printed gun people and be like, well, I have an MP5. I have the Cadillac of 3D printed guns.
It's still the cheapest MP5 then.
Yeah,
right?
The one time it came close is Century brought in a bunch of blim Turkish MP5s that had known bad welds, and they didn't disclose that they were blims, which was the really cool part. But they sold them for like $1,200 with a $200 rebate. So at that point, like, MAF is selling barrels that are pressed and pinned for these builds specifically. And whenever you bought that and all the other parts you need, you're coming in at about $1,000 to build it that way. So at the time that Century was passing off blim guns without telling you that it was a blim gun, it was about an even break. But the dealer price now on the Turkish MP5s is like $1,350. And then the thing that I will remind people of is those guns weigh 8 pounds out of the box with iron sights. The gun there on the bottom in this picture with a loaded drum mag weighs 8 pounds. So you get an optic, you get backup iron sights, you get a flashlight, you get a flash hider, and you get a brace, and that's the aluminum brace, and 50 rounds loaded, and you come in at the same weight, which, at the end of the day is an interesting trade-off. And then if you want to take one of those Turkish, $1,300 MP5s and turn it into something like this, you're looking at $200 for a good claw mount. You're looking at $300 for a rear end that can take a brace. And plus, I guess you can then jump for your optic. But by that time, you have like a 10-pound MP5, which is everybody that makes a gamer MP5, a traditional steel-built MP5 that builds a gamer loadout, it ends up being like an 8, 9, 10-pound gun, which does help it shoot even more flat. But you could have something that shoots effectively as flat for a much less weight if you go and build it yourself. And of course, then you get down the rabbit hole of, but the steel build's more durable. And yeah, that's almost certainly the case. But most of us, what we're doing is shooting at paper and or steel, in which case having something that's a little bit lighter that you can then put more weight on and then have your flashlight and look cooler, I think that's better.
It's always been a funny debate when people talk about, like, oh, well, the real thing is much more durable. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not what we're doing here. Like, right.
Like the first 3 rules of gun safety. Number 1 is have fun. And number 2 is look cool. And I think number 3 is don't look uncool. So like this helps you look cooler for cheaper. It makes you safer with guns because you look cooler. There we go. But I guess there it is with I guess an underdog. So I don't know if I mentioned this last time. It's a fun story, but I was showing a person in real life how bidding on gun parts kits work, because they were interested in the printed guns, and I was explaining to them, like, oh, you do this and you do this, and showing them the gun broker auctions. And I was like, well, we could bid like $100 on this Shield 40 kit, and then, I mean, knowing I probably wouldn't win it, I just bid $100 on it, got it for $75. And I'm like, shit, I never wanted one of these guns. I've only heard bad things about these guns. But Freeman Don't Ask 1776, it had a printable frame for him for a long time. Like the second printable non-22 handgun frame that existed was this. And so I went and printed this out, and then went to shoot it. And I was ringing steel at 50 yards with this subcompact 40 single stack. And I was like, oh, holy cow, this thing fits my hands so well, and I can shoot so good with it. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, I was going to make this a gun that I like tortured to get updates on social media. Like I was gonna like leave it in the back of a toilet for a week and then go and shoot it. But then I actually kind of unironically fell in love with it because it's just so good and I can shoot it so well. So I ended up picking up a couple more of the 40 kits and then one of the 9 kits. But I only wanted to hate the shields because previously I'd shot like the squiggle stack, the skinny frame Glocks. Hated those, couldn't hit anything with those. So I figured anything that was like designed for tiny ladylike hands, also I wouldn't be able to shoot with. And then I shoot great with this. So that was confusing because it turns out I can shoot the skinny ladylike guns really well if it's these and not the Glocks. But that's my story of how I ended up simping for the Smith & Wesson shields. Unironically, I think they're great.
Is this a printed brace here, or is this a?
No, that's the SB Tactical, way too expensive one. And the funny thing about that is, I think it was the next day after I took this picture, I went and shot it, and that brace broke. Like the aluminum folding mechanism on it just broke, which is great because that's a $300 brace, which is kind of expensive to have break from. The only recoil it's ever felt is 9mm from an MP5. Come on.
On a printed MP5.
And so I thought about emailing them to complain, but I was like, I never actually used the folding except to look cool. And so I just JB welded the thing shut, and it's held up great since then.
You should get the SIG folding.
Yeah, the SIG
instead of the SB
one.
Tactical.
Right.
When you mentioned being able to shoot a single stack skinny gun better than a big one, that actually reminds me of the last time I went to the range with my buddy. We're shooting full size and regular compact, and he's just not doing well. He brings out a Glock 43 and he's shooting amazing. And he was like, "Oh, well, who would have thought?" It's kind of funny.
so much of handguns comes down to like the mechanics of the hand and the way that the muscles in your hand will move the bones in your hand as you go to pull a trigger. And for some people with some guns, it just does not work right. Which is, that's me and the skinny frame Glocks. I can't, I no matter what I do, no matter how I pull the trigger, if I do the thing where I teacup it and barely hold onto the gun, so there's no way I'm flinching, still miss. Can't hit anything past 25 yards. It's terrible.
Are you one of those terrible left-handed people like he is?
I am a terrible left-handed person.
Oh, so there may be correlation there.
That may be. But then with the skinny frame shields and all, everybody tells, everybody online says like the recoil on the 40 is so bad, it's nerve pain, it hurts your wrist. I'm sitting here shooting it like, well, this is just fantastic. Like, it is snappy, of course, but people are like, it's shooting a 12 gauge one-handed. No, it's not. Stop being a baby. Boomers. Oh yeah, there's more of the short barrel 308. Somebody asked, I think it was on Twitter. They asked what that thing groups at 100, and I was like, honestly, I haven't shot this thing at 100 yards because it's not for that at all. But I decided I'd entertain the request, and so I went and shot it at 100 yards, and it's got the issue the set me's normally do where the trigger's terrible. Plus, it was using a red dot. I'm getting my excuses out of the way. Plus, it doesn't have a stock, so you can't really shoulder it. I just put a nub in there to cover the recoil buffer on the thing. But I did manage to shoot a couple of 3-inch groups at 100 yards with it, which I was pretty impressed with. And then I went and shot soda cans at 100 yards. And it's funny because ordinarily with a 308 that has like a real barrel, you shoot a soda can at 100 yards, the soda can's essentially split in half or split almost vertically. It messes it up. You shoot soda cans with this and they just sort of fall over. It's like it just puts a hole straight through them and they fall down, which would indicate it's the bullets are probably 2,000 foot per second or below at 100 yards. They're just like essentially a handgun round at that point. And a handgun full metal jacket against soda cans at any distance, it just puts a hole straight through it.
So you're probably getting like a whole 12 feet per second at the end of the.
Yeah, it's surprisingly low. I should chronograph it, but my concern was like this thing throws enough of a fireball. I'm afraid about destroying my chronograph. I think I checked on paper, and I guess somebody could just do the ballistics by the inch and look it up. But I'm pretty sure it's barely above 2,000 foot per second at the muzzle.
Wow.
What is the grouping on a factory set me?
Not good. The acceptance criteria,
like 5 inches, isn't it?
This acceptance criteria was like 5 or 6 inches, and then the Germans for the G3s wanted it to be 4, but we're willing to accept 5. So it was not good. But some of the reading and experimentation I've done to that effect seems to be that a lot of that was there. Just barrel metallurgy at the time was not great, nowhere near as good as it is now. And so some of their accuracy issues were their barrels, though it seems a lot of the accuracy issues also stem from the fact that the spot welds that hold the trunnion into the flimsy sheet metal receiver of those guns isn't holding it particularly rigid. So between shots, especially as the barrel snaps around, the trunnion does not want to settle exactly where it was. Because those, the receivers on those guns are exquisitely thin. And if you ever get the experience to build one of those guns from a flat, as you go about like straightening the gun, at least a thought that I had in the back of my mind is, this gun is so incredibly easy to bend. How did these guns not get bent in the field? And probably they did. That the sheet metal is so flimsy. Like if you took it over your knee, you could bend the gun enough that I'm sure the bolt would be hard to rack. And if you, especially down at the mag well, if you were to like pinch that or fall on that or had a knee fall on that when you tripped, you're not going to get mags in that gun anymore. So like exactly,
HK-53, and that was exactly what happened. Was I dropped it once. Like I always tossed my AR and the magazine well from that day on. If you put just a little bit too much left pressure, the mag will drop.
Yep. And so it's always kind of shocking to me. And so when it comes time to realize like those guns shoot significantly less accurately than I've experienced with like the crappy corn and soybean printed receivers. I mean, the reason why is that plastic is going to be more rigid than your crummy spot welds in a flimsy receiver, which is shocking. But whenever you stop and consider it, makes sense. Also, the fact that the U.S. made barrels for these guns are kind of fantastic, whereas the original barrels weren't nearly as good. And I guess this picture is just I had a blue and or green themed range day with roller delay guns, and I guess it's not quite as gamery a loadout for the MP5, but they both have obnoxious muzzle brakes on them. The 308 being a little bit more obnoxious to shoot just because it's a 308. And yeah, more MP5. Can you tell I like my MP5s? I take pictures of them constantly. Have to let everybody know. I have an MP5. Wow.
On the topic of the MP5, the other day, I think it was YouBit sent me a picture that I believe you tweeted out, sometime in the last couple of weeks, of a different version of the MP5 that you were working on.
Right.
What can you tell me a little more about what you're working on there?
So the MP5s has been a continual evolution as the beta testing has gone like fantastically well. PSR has put probably 2,000 rounds through his at this point. I mean, he's just been pounding on the silly thing. And multiple other testers. One of them was like, I did 1,000 rounds in a day just because I was going to shoot the thing till it was broken because he printed some part of it wrong. And so he goes and shoots 1,000 rounds through the thing, and he's like, "That's all the 9mm I have. What the hell?" It won't break. But as far as durability testing has gone, it's been pretty perfect. I've had tweaks of the documentation to clarify stuff that people weren't totally clear on, and quite a few times that I've tweaked things about the assembly. Like in some of PSR's earlier videos, people notice like the charging handle bounces back on its own. And interestingly, that has not happened. Like slow motion video on mine never happens. So it must have been the way the print tolerances worked out. His charging handle was just a little bit loose enough that it would sometimes bounce back just a little bit on its own, just under inertia. And so I designed a system just like the actual MP5, where there's a little spring-loaded detent that holds the charging handle forward under recoil. So I've been adding like little additions to the MP5 as I went along. And one of the things that I had been meaning to add was a paddle mag release. And so, the original MP5s had a paddle mag release or a button, because some right-handed people have little itty-bitty midget fingers and they can't reach the mag release with their trigger finger. And so I wanted to incorporate the paddle because A, paddle's cool. B, you can have that feature. And so the thing that I then did, I had added the paddle mag release, but while I was playing around with that, I wanted to add one of the ideas that I've also had that people had suggested is they want to have the MP5 but without the flanges, because everybody wants to be upset about the flanges. And there's a reason they exist from a design perspective. Like people compare them to like a pipeline or a sewer pipe or whatever. And I don't get upset about that characterization, because I don't think it's untrue or unfair. But whenever you stop and think about what those pipes are meant to accomplish, it's not altogether dissimilar to what we're accomplishing here, where there's pressure of some sort on the inside that you want to keep from getting outside, and you cannot risk misalignment of these parts, and they have to be stiff where they connect because that's where pressure would be concentrated. So when you stop and think about like a printed upper receiver for a roller delay gun, it like checks pretty much all of those boxes. Of course, we're not trying to keep a fluid and or a gas from spilling out into its environment around it. That much is different. But as far as from like the design perspective, it's not a dissimilar use case. And so the flanges on where the parts mate, of course, you've got whatever stress or pressure is put on the inside of the part will be concentrated at its ends, and having the flanges on there helps mitigate that issue, as well as it makes a very simple way to mate the parts together. That's not something where it's very hard to mess up, and it's very easy to align when you have multiple points of contact through the flange. But I was always interested in this idea of, could it be made flangeless? And my thought was, yeah, probably it could, but I don't know how durable it'll be. So a couple nights I had insomnia, I started messing around with it. And then after a couple days, I started printing. And then after you're like 3 days of printing parts, I put it together. And first off, the thing looked great, I thought. I don't know if I like it necessarily better than the flanged version, because it's like, you decide which of your children you like best at that point. And some people have even said they prefer the look of the flange version, which I didn't expect, because it seems like everybody just wants to complain about the way the flanges look. But it was interesting to see. But it's the flangeless MP5 is I've tested, probably put 500 rounds through it by now, and it has held up perfectly. Though I know a bunch of people have been asking or assuming that it'll release whenever the flange version does. That's probably won't be the case. What I'm planning on doing is the paddle mag release, which you can see there. I want to backport that compatibility to the flanged version, which should be okay. Okay. And then I want to release the flanged version on its own here before too long. A question of if I want to make like a dedicated MP5K handguard first or not. And then that'll be its own release. And then the flanged one will come later once it has been sufficiently tested. Because, I don't want to rush right to, well, mine did 500 rounds. It must be fine. It'll probably end up having its own beta cycle and everything, especially because, it does have different hardware, because it doesn't have a bunch of screws holding together the sewer pipe. It's got threaded rod in the top and those sorts of things. But it seemed like people were very excited about the flangeless MP5, and I knew it was sort of an attainable thing the whole time, but I suppose there it is. And I also bought myself, I always wanted to get one of the square Holosun optics, because I thought they looked cool, and I thought they'd especially look cool on a 3D printed gun. And so I got one for this build specifically. And I must say, I like the wide field of view, the square field of view. I like a lot better than a round field of view. Like whenever you're used to like the Sig Romeo 5 footprint, where it's just like a 20 millimeter lens you're looking through, the giant square field of view is actually kind of nice.
So are these rock and lock mags or straight push?
So the MP5 is funny, and I guess the way that and I guess it dates back to the Set Me See, really, where not necessarily to the same extent as on the Set Me See. MP5 mags are kind of both. On the Set Me See, it does have a lug on the front like an AK, but that lug is like super, super thin. And the reason that Set Me's have mag compatibility issues is actually because that lug is so small on the magazine that locks against the trunnion. Meanwhile, the MP5 does not lock against the trunnion at all. So the way the geometry actually works out, I guess it would be nice if I could draw a picture, but I'll see if I can describe it in words. The mag catch being at the rear of the mag well sets the height the magazine can come up to. And then the trunnion has the over travel stop for the magazine, and that sets the height that the magazine can rock forward to. And then the front of the magwell, there's a Douglas little feature on the front of MP5 magazines, and that pilots against the front of the magwell to adjust the front back travel of the magazine. So whenever you stick an MP5 magazine into its magwell, it will stick straight in, but it won't really lock in place until you push it backwards and get the rear of the mag to the right height that it engages with the slot. And that seems like, it is probably overcomplicated, but the advantage there is you have the rigidity of your mag in the magwell of a rock and lock system, where it may have a little bit of slop fore back and a little bit of slop side to side, but it's not like an AR mag where it like wiggles all over the place. But you still can have, the mag still comes out easily. It can come out with the push of a button. And most MP5s don't work this way, but MP5s that are well worn in will drop free. With the printed MP5, it's interesting. The 3D printing, people want to complain about tolerances, but by and large, you can get better tolerances on inside stuff like a inside magwell geometry with a 3D printer than you can with steel stamping. The steel stamping is not a terribly precise thing at the end of the day. Like 10 thou accuracy on a piece of stamped steel is really good. Meanwhile, 10 thou is like what your out of the box ender can hold for when it comes to printing the inside of a magwell. So with the printed MP5, you're able to have a magwell that can fit the polymer magazines without them being overly tight, and will also drop free the steel mags, which is like, that's the creme de la creme for your steel MP5 build, is if you can have it use the polymer mags and also drop free the steel ones, where really only the well worn in HK guns will do that. Of course, I'm sure there'll be somebody listening is like, well, my brand new SP5 right out of the box was that way, and I don't doubt that that's possible, but by and large, the German guns are designed just to work with the German mags only and specifically, and they don't always drop straight out because of just the way that steel stamping comes out. That's sort of one neat thing, one neat lesson that you pick up about the MP5's magwell is it's probably more complicated than it has to be. But I guess on the flip side of that is MP5 magazines are fantastically designed. I think they're some of the best double feed position magazines, but the sort of downside, perhaps, if you will, there is the geometry to hold the magazine into the gun is super complex. And as soon as I started answering this, I remembered who is he? Mark Serbu has a video on YouTube talking about the same thing, because he's got a little project that he wants to have take MP5 mags, and he's gone through the same trials and tribulations as I have making a 3D printable MP5 magwell.
It's funny. A lot of people that are in our industry don't really, or I should say our community, don't really get the complexities of trying to get magazines to work in 3D print guns. And especially when you start bringing in like Scorpion mags or Glock mags or whatever, like single feed versus double feed. And like, it's all the time that a lot of the devs here, like, oh, this should take Scorpion mags. You're like, well, it's a single feed barrel. You can't. Like,
you can try, but very early on, I tried to make this MP5 take Evo mags, and the issue becomes the MP5 mags, if you look at them, they have like dimples at the front where they sort of scrooch in, and those dimples point the bullet exactly at the chamber where they need to be. AR mags have the same feature where the little dimple in the magazine starts pushing the round towards the chamber. And Evo mags have that to some extent, but not the right angle to work with an MP5. But the big issue with the Evo mags is the MP5 magazine sits up inside the trunnion a little bit, and Evo mags can't both simultaneously fit up high enough or in far enough into the trunnion. So you can have it sit too low, then it sends rounds into the bottom of the barrel, or you can have it sit back enough that it can sit up high enough, and then it's having rounds feed in an uncontrolled space, like the rounds just in open space being pushed by the bolt, in which case it will consistently miss the chamber. And so I got it to the point that like maybe you'd have like 1 out of every 3 rounds would fail to feed, but that's the best I could possibly get it with the long distance you were having uncontrolled feeding over. And so I ended up abandoning it. And then all that I had done from that point was then size the magwell for MP5 mags, and then that test print just worked perfectly from then on. So I nailed the MP5 magwell geometry then on the first try, because I'd got the magazine in the exact right spot that it sat where it needed to under the trunnion with the Evo mags. So switching to a magazine that actually fits in the gun, fits with the rest of the gun, got it working perfectly, which was perhaps nice, right? I saved myself a lot of headache of learning how the MP5 magwell works the hard way by learning it with Evo mags. So I could take out my frustration with the Evo mags for being shit and awful before I then realized it's just because the MP5 wants MP5 mags. It's not necessarily a fault of the gun, I would say, but the way the cookie crumbles.
Yeah.
The same way ARs don't want to take AK mags unless you do nasty shit to the bolt carriers.
Have you seen the Lee Sporting lowers for MP5s?
I have, and that was the funny thing about those is for those who don't know, it's a lower housing for an MP5, a standard steel MP5 that lets it take an AR fire control group and AR pistol grip. And it was funny to see that company release that for a couple of reasons. So I'll start with the deep lore reason. In the very early days of FOSCAD, there was a guy working on that same exact idea. And instead of releasing it, he licensed it to a company, and the company was going to let him release it maybe one day. and then the company went under, and they had never they were never able to hash out like, can I actually share this on the internet though? So like he didn't want to get sued by this company that's bankrupt, right? Because a bankrupt company will sue anyone to stay alive. So he didn't then want to release it. So that sort of died off. And so this company was then working on that same sort of thing around the same time that I started working on the printable MP5. And of course, because it's a whole printable MP5 chassis that I designed, I had the creative liberty to make the upper its own thing and the lower and magwell its own thing. Whereas on a standard MP5, the magwell is a part of the upper. And there's a couple of reasons why I did that. Some of them are secret reasons that you can all learn about later. It's a surprise reason. But the other reason being, just from a standpoint of it being 3D printed, that works out a lot better because you can have your lower be one integral part and have the magwell, and your upper be one integral part. So you don't have like a flimsy magwell that's dangling off the front of the upper. That's something that could be broken easily, because then you're stuck with the standard steel part design space. So that was sort of my main reason for doing that. So I guess my approach, the thing that I made differed from the Lee Armory guys from a standpoint of I have a magwell on the front of mine, but then we had both sort of simultaneously developed an AR-15 fire control grouped, AR-15 pistol gripped way to run an MP5. And I guess the one bit of shade that I'll throw at their thing is they're charging like $200-300 for like, they're also 3D printing theirs. And they're doing it on an MJF machine, which is like, as far as the industrial ways to 3D print things, it's like the cheap industrial way to print things. But they're charging like $300 for this silly thing. And it's funny because like ordinarily, and this is maybe a teachable moment, is like in the traditional gun industry, a lot of the reason they'll mark up something that costs them $2 to make is because the IP behind it costs them a lot of money to develop. Meanwhile, I'm sitting over here going like, if that took you more than 2 tries, I'm better than you. Like, that's not that hard. What you designed here isn't actually that novel or complex. I did it on a whim. So what's the big deal, guys? So it was it is interesting and perhaps telling of the gun industry at large, where they will sell you a $2 widget for $300 because they figure nobody else is going to come along and do the same thing. But literally at the same time they were doing it, I was doing the same thing, which is just sort of funny.
So rewinding a little bit, you were talking a second ago about the anticipated sort of release plan for the MP5, which the correct name is the KF5. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the Amigo Grande was like, it's big friend in Spanish. Technically, it's friend big in Spanish because Spanish they mess up their adjectives and nouns or whatever. It's weird, but I wanted to stick with that for the MP5, so I did Kleiner Freund 5, which is German for little friend, right? Because it's the 9mm one, which I thought was clever. But then nobody wanted to remember KF5. It was called the KP5, and I saw people calling it the KM5, and it was like called every possible different name 5. And so I sort of gave up, and it's just the printed MP5 at this point. You can call it whatever you want. It's the Amigo Grande name really seems to have stuck. And then the KF5 name didn't stick so well, even though I think Kleiner Freund is a great name for an MP5. It's your little buddy, but
it's the abbreviation that got everyone all confused.
Right. I guess KF is similar enough to KP, and I don't know that there is a KM5 anywhere, but I've seen people call it the MK5. I know it's two letters in a specific order. It's tricky.
So I guess the question I have about the release is, how do you plan out your releases? Like, what is you come up with a design, you churn out the CAD, you get it in the hands of your testers. Where do you go from there? What is your approach to doing a release?
Oh geez. So from design, whatever the idea is, that can be multifaceted too. You put something together. I'll usually test something to the point where it's had at least 1,000 rounds through it by the time anybody else has it, just because I've got the backyard range privilege or whatever. So it's easy for me to put 1,000 rounds through something because I can do 100 one day, 200 the next day. I can wait a day and then shoot 300 the next day. So I don't have to like schedule very long around going to shoot, because I can just like you go shoot and then come home, and then it took me like 30 minutes. Whereas some people have the misfortune of having to like drive an hour to a range or something. I couldn't. I don't think I'd
for an hour.
I don't think I'd be able to live like that. I wouldn't be able to make it.
That's me. Go back home.
I literally just before this was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do a garage pop. So if you hear anything, totally legit. It's totally cool."
So that certainly does help from a standpoint of expediency, right? So I can get 1,000 rounds through a build by the time beta testers get their hands on it. And so what I aim to do is have documentation in as polished a state I can get it by the time it goes into beta. So that way, most of what's being like, I know the design's good for 1,000 rounds or whatever, but what I want to test is that people can take the documentation and make a gun without screwing something up along the way. So most of the value that I try to get out of a beta is specifically like, where are people going to take my instructions and do something horribly wrong with them? Because there's always that guy. And of course, at least to some extent, as part of this teachable lesson, I appreciate that guy. Like, he's the guy who wants to print something that says print it rails up, then they print it rails down. So like, you've now at least learned, like, I need to make it more clear. Hey, Nitty, don't do this. This is stupid. Don't do it that way. And so that's a lot of what the value you can sort of squeeze out of a beta is. You can have documentation that's like you've already seen the next 3 things an idiot will do with your instructions, and you've eliminated that from being a possibility. And so that's certainly something useful that can be pulled out of there. Depending on the beta, sometimes I want to see 1,000 rounds from a tester's gun. Sometimes I want to see a tester's gun is at least as accurate as mine. Sometimes it's been I just want to see that people can put the stupid thing together and have it work reliably. And so depending on how that goes, in another one is like a compatibility of an assorted number of parts. So like with something like the MP5, there's not like a lot, there's maybe 2 outfits that you can get MP5 parts from that aren't like egregiously expensive. Mm-hmm. So I was easily able to test that on my own, and people in the beta have tested all that. Whereas like something like I've got a printable AR-10 lower that's in beta now. There are so many different AR-10 uppers out there that testing a wide variety of those is sort of something that I'm interested in having seen done in the beta before a release comes about. So once something has then hit that criteria that I've sat there and I guess to some extent, to avoid, right? Because like releasing something's work. And I'm generally rather work adverse, as strange as it may seem to hear. Like I've got that I'm just motivated enough that I can find the laziest way to do something. There have been times that I've put off something that's totally ready for release just because I don't want to. I want to focus on building new stuff instead of wrapping up the bow on this shiny present.
Productive procrastination.
Right. So there will be a lot of productive procrastination. Like I almost was ready to just drop the MP5 after PSR said it was his favorite printed gun or whatever. Like, oh, this will be epic. And I'm sitting there thinking like, well, I could add this and I could tweak this and I can improve this and I can modify this. All the while knowing like, I make one change, I'm going to want to see some beta testers, test out that change is good. So, I can stall off betas. I'm very good at stalling off betas for adding new features. Although I will say, I don't think I've ever let a beta sit there and languish, like refusing to make improvements to it just because I didn't want to release it. I will usually at least find one thing I can improve on it in order to stall it off for any amount of time. And then, once it is finally ready for release and I can't think of more features or whatever else to add, then you push it out there on its merry way. And then you wait for people to tell you like, oh, I found a typo on page like 90 of the documentation. And you're like, okay, great. I had like 12 revisions of this documentation fixing typos and there's still more. That's just wonderful.
With your AR-10 that you were mentioning, when you're getting into that, are you primarily looking at the DPMS pattern because that's like the most common, or are you looking at the Armalite?
The Armalite, the little notchback ones, I'm not interested in just because they are so uncommon. But
sure.
The funny thing about AR-10s is they were never militarily adopted by the U.S. Armed Forces until very recently, and when they did adopt it was the SR-25, which is an Armalite pattern gun. Woohoo! Good going, very smart decisions made. But the different manufacturers that make AR-10s can't seem to agree because there was never a mil spec for these guns. So nobody wants to agree on like what size a takedown pin should be. And I've forgotten what the fractional inch size is that they are nominally, but people will make them like 2 thou undersized, 3 thou oversized. Everybody wants to do their own different thing to make it more better or whatever. And what it really means is it's possible to get an upper from one place, a lower from another place, and takedown pins from another place, and no 3 of them will fit together. Fantastic. Even though they all claim that they're the same pattern, they're not quite the same pattern. So my objective with my AR-10 build was to take all of that variability out of the equation entirely. So instead of using AR-10 takedown pins, I use AR-15 takedown pins and have a little brass shim that you install in the upper that takes an AR-10 upper lug down to the 1/4 inch AR-15 size. So I've like bolt catches are one. Nobody that makes an AR-10 agrees what size the bolt catch should be, and everybody who makes an AR-10 lower can't agree how far out away from the mag well the bolt catch pin axis should be. Everybody wants to do it differently. So I just made mine take AR-15 bolt catches because they're all the same. So it's a little bit of like a head scratching wild goose chase to some extent, but I think I have pretty much cornered it to the point where you can just buy an AR-10 upper that says it's DPMS pattern, and you can follow the documentation, and you shouldn't have to like take a Dremel tool to your $2,000 upper or whatever to make it fit together. Because AR-10 stuff is like even the PSA AR-10 uppers are not cheap compared to AR-15 stuff. Again, because there's no mil spec and nobody wants to agree, so you can't go to supplier A that just shits out AR-10 parts all day long. Because every AR-10 part that you're contracting to have make is your own special sauce pattern that's totally more reliable than everybody else's.
Reinventing the wheel to run yourself over is essentially what the whole conversation is.
Yes, entirely.
Spicy question. How come no official full auto FGC-9?
Most of that has to deal with the fact that like if you consider the FGC-9 sort of use case, if you will. Of course, I guess we're not on YouTube, so I can say the quiet part out loud. For places where you can't find ammunition, right, or guns are controlled, and ammunition, I mean, by and large, anywhere on Earth, ammo can be found, especially 9mm because it's ubiquitous. It's been around for like 100 years now. That sure you can find ammo, but ammo to you is going to be costing like $10 a round plus an extreme amount of risk. And so having something that is fully automatic at that point is just going to be a massive liability for ammo waste, especially when you consider that the FGC-9 is not the smoothest recoil impulse ever, and it does not have a terribly long bolt travel. And so whenever you get that thing slamming full auto, if you're not like somebody who's well-versed in shooting a gun, which people in countries where you can't own guns generally aren't, you're not going to control this thing at all. You're going to be like hoodlum drug dealer McGee who just got his first Glock switch. And he's like, wow, I'm going to find out how easy it is to shoot the sky. Like, oh wow, that's a lot of muzzle climb in a hurry. So that was most of the motivation, because like early on in the FGC-9 design, we toyed around with an open bolt design where it would be more or less the same form factor, only you'd have just a fixed firing pin and some sort of a recessed breech face so that it would feed reliably. But the two things that we sort of immediately became worried about is open bolt guns, just by way of existing, no matter how you build an open bolt gun, if it doesn't have a dedicated out of battery safety, which very few of them do, they just fire out of battery. MP40s fire out of battery, Riesings fire out of battery, Thompsons fire out of battery. They all, Mac 11s that are open bolt, fire out of battery. That's just how they work. And there's no mitigating that whenever you have a fixed firing pin, just sort of the way it goes. But we were interested in avoiding that risk, as well as the fact that, like, I mean, it becomes an uncontrollable gun in the hands of somebody who's not used to controlling a gun in the first place, as well as it sort of becomes an ammo liability. And I know the counterexample that I've seen people point to is like, well, the French Resistance had Stins and the Warsaw Uprising had the Blyskowicza, and it was full auto. But I think most of that's because it is easier to make a full auto only gun than it is to make something that's semi-auto. And perhaps also on that point, if you're trying to shoot something 100 yards away, let's say it's 100 yards being from a 9mm carbine with a stock, that's not an unreasonable distance to shoot something. And if you're interested in ambushing somebody, it'll always be inside of 100 yards if you're doing it with a 9mm. And so using an open bolt, it is actually kind of difficult to hit something with your first shot at 100 yards, because the bolt slams shut and the muzzle of the gun dips down. And until you're well-versed shooting the things, you're always going to miss your first round low. And then once it starts recoiling, especially with something like a Sten, it just becomes like a constant push. And then you can hold it on your target at 100 yards and hit it no problem. But you're going to be consistently having trouble with sort of that first shot. So at least from accuracy reasons, at least from a standpoint of when you're going to ambush somebody, full auto may not be the best bet in that regard either. And I know by now I've seen multiple different people come up with solutions for making FGC-9s full auto, including one guy who just like welded his firing pin in place forward, which is like that's the caveman version of full auto, because like you just pull the charging handle back and slap it and it starts going.
It's full auto.
Yes, it's full auto. It's ride the lightning. I guess you could pull the charging handle back to stop the bolt at some point, but
it's a 30-round burst.
Yeah. So that was those are things that I've seen, and of course, I do encourage people to take the platform for what it is. And if your use case for the thing is like, I just want to have lots of fun and make much noise, then certainly a full auto one will suit you better. But once we had sort of Stark and I had talked to people in gun control places around the world at the time. Hong Kong was a thing. And talking with them, like they will be lucky if they have 30 rounds of ammo in their thing. And if they need to ambush somebody, 30 rounds will get you a better gun. But if you're nervous, you haven't ever shot a gun before, and you hop out of your hiding spot and you dump 30 rounds and don't hit them, and now you're fucked and all your buddies are fucked because 30 rounds didn't get you a new gun.
Yeah. One thing to note for people who haven't fired open bolt, have that privilege and luxury, what Ivan's talking about is when that bolt slams forward, you press the trigger, the bolt slams forward, you have basically huge barrel droop, and then the recoil, you have huge barrel rise. So it's, imagine what you get with your normal closed bolt semi-auto pop. You get about double that every single shot of your open bolt gun. So when he's saying it's uncontrollable, it's rough with open bolt guns. It's not enough practice.
So I've shot a Walther MPL quite a bit, and I think it was one of the guns that did it the best from a standpoint of just from the way that gun's bolt balances. Like it's really bad on a Sten because that bolt is going ahead of where your second hand is. So that's all it's from a standpoint of center of gravity. It's all foobar at that point. The MPL has like a normal hand guard, and the bolt center of gravity doesn't go past your support hand. So it's controllable with the MPL as long as you pull the trigger and you feel the bolt start going forward, and you just stiffen your arm and start you flinch, but in reverse.
Yeah.
So like it's certainly possible to do. And after enough practice, I got to the point that I was being reasonably accurate with one at 50 yards, but it's certainly not intuitive. And it's really weird because you think it's just a 1 pound bolt slamming forward. And I guess if you have an open bolt that has a bolt hold open, you can do this as an experiment where you line up your sights on the target and then you close the bolt. And however much drop you have whenever the bolt slams shut, you'd be having that only a bullet fired is a part of that. So you're having a bullet end up wherever your muzzle managed to dip down to. So it's sort of a weird thing, and certainly can be learned. But that's like that's one of those things. Like it's the discussion about the bolt hold open on the AK, where yes, it is entirely true that you can learn mag management and ammo management, that you will never run into an instance where you have 0 rounds in your gun and don't know it because you don't have a bolt hold open. Training totally solves that, but you actually have to train for that to happen. That doesn't happen for free. It is entirely possible if you've never trained, you shoot 30 rounds to your AK and you're like, I probably still have 10 left. And so you skip that reload. And then in reality, you're empty chamber. So much like having a bolt hold open, having a gun that doesn't slam forward and muzzle drop the first time you fire it, every time you fire it, can be a nice thing. Which is why the MP5 is like whatever king of submachine guns for special operations or whatever. And it's it is noticeably different from most other submachine guns in that it is closed bolt. And I think the reason it sort of maintains that reputation for being very controllable, A, is because of roller delay, right? We've been over that already. But B is because it is a closed bolt gun, you don't have that bolt slamming forward sensation that makes your first shot accuracy not as great.
So what do you think there's some hypothetical dev, and this dev is going to make the spiritual successor to the FGC-9. What would that look like?
Spiritual successor, if we take sorry, that was a painful burp. If we take JStark's vision sort of into consideration, It's essentially what 3D Arms is doing with his FGC-12 sort of shotgun. I think he's been calling it the FGC-12, where it's more or less same concept. It's but in 12 gauge, because a 12 gauge ammo can to some extent be 3D printed. We've seen that multiple times over now. Also, B, probably second to 9mm, maybe third to 22. 12 gauge is all over the place, right? There's 12 gauge ammo in China even. Because like in China, if you're a hunter or whatever, they'll let you have 22s and shotguns.
You know, as you bring that up, we should start sending 12 gauge to China the way they send fentanyl here.
Yeah, I mean, while we're having Fed posty ideas, that's not a terribly bad idea. You want a job at the CIA?
Maybe I already work there.
He is glowing right now. So in your mind, what was the explicit goal of the FGC-9? Like, is it contained entirely in the name?
I think Stark picked the name, I think, more as a point of frustration, because like, he had been to America and had shot guns here, and like one of the stories he'd always tell me is they went to a Walmart in Texas, and they walked out of there with like 3 cases of cream soda, because they were planning on shooting the cream soda, because I guess most people don't like cream soda. I'm not a big fan. Stark ended up finding out it's his favorite thing ever, and you can't buy it anywhere but in the US, which was a big bummer for him. But he bought 3 cases of cream soda, and they bought like 500 rounds of ammo. And the whole time he was sort of just standing there with the friends who were hosting him. And this was well before he was into 3D printed guns or anything in his youth. But they walk out of there with 500 rounds of ammo. And the way he tells the story, he's like, he keeps expecting the cops to come chasing out after him, because they just walked out of that place with 500 rounds of ammo. And of course, to all of us, it's like, yeah, whatever. It's just yeah, you got to go to Walmart, got to get the essentials: eggs, bread, milk, 500 rounds of ammo. That's just how it works. And so he was just like in disbelief about that. And so of course he wanted that in Germany and really worldwide. And he wanted, more than anything, he wanted to own a Glock 19. He wanted a Glock 19 so badly, and was never able to have one living over there. It's extremely expensive item to buy black market, and forget about getting one legitimately, because it's essentially impossible. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So he was rather adamant about that, and so I think he picked the name more as like more as like right. It's like gun controls, making it so I can't do the things I want to do. Fuck it. From talking with him, sort of the goal was maybe something that's a little bit more benignly aligned than like I'm frustrated and hate the government, where it's like of course he was very sympathetic to the instances all around the world, right? And it's existed since forever, where there's the people who have given up their arms or were denied their arms, or who put in a shit situation through history or force from a foreign government, who are denied the sort of niceties that, and I would argue Germany is a lot less nice than living in the US in the regards of the sort of niceties that freedom affords you. But even then, like there were countries that were much worse off than his even, and he sympathized with and sort of identified these people's need for help, and that he sort of recognized the FGC-9 was that. So part of it was like he just wants to have a gun, but the other part of it is he realized as the project got going that this isn't just I'm going to make a gun for me. This is he and I sort of realized around the time that I'd put the first FGC-9 together with the ECM barrel, and we sort of had this collective realization on a call that this is fundamentally different from a standpoint of, like, I guess before this you had the Ludi SMG, but if you've ever read through the Ludi SMG documentation, you have to be a gunsmith first in order to understand what that's saying, to then build it second or third or fourth once you've like botched your first couple of prototypes. And Brandon Herrera's video on the Ludi submachine gun, I think, hits the nail on the head, where super cool. It was nice to see the concept put out there. You can tell Ludi wasn't a guy who understood how to make anything, let alone guns. and you can really tell that that documentation was rushed. And I mean, it was a craft produced gun in the very original sense of the word, where a craftsman made this and he knew what he was doing, but he's not going to tell you how he knew that. And the FGC-9 sort of differed from that, where unlike really any do-it-yourself or gun before that, I think, because what is the FGC-9 if you compare it to any conventional made arm? It doesn't have an extractor. It's a not great feeling 9mm direct blowback that's huge and kind of bulky. It's nothing to write home about. But I think the impressive thing is the do-it-yourself nature was really fulfilled from a standpoint of it's a craft-produced firearm that isn't necessarily about the firearm. It's about the craft produced. It explicates all of the crafts produced and explicates on the firearm, right? Because at the end of the day, you did make a gun. And so I think that's sort of the, that's what made the FGC-9 so different. And so that was, it became evident that was very much a motivating thing for him, because of course he was Kurdish, right? And so the Kurds have had like they've drawn the short straw in history for like the past forever.
Yeah.
They have been, shit on and backstabbed by everybody who they've ever thought was a friend as people. And Jake Hanrahan on his Popular Front podcast has talked at length about this, where the groups of Kurdish people who have sort of survived and stuck to their traditions and way of lives were the ones who didn't give up their guns. Meanwhile, JStark came to Germany as a refugee, from these situations where he was somebody who didn't have a gun. So of course it's perhaps understandable and maybe even noble that he then identified like there are still people who weren't able to escape who would benefit from, it's the ones with guns who ended up like not being shit on by the radical Islamists, or even the Turkish government, and then the United States government went and backstabbed the Kurds. It was kind of a shit situation that they were stuck in and are still stuck in to this day. But that was sort of a thing he identified. And then the uprising in Hong Kong, there were FGC-9s printed there. None of them ended up being used. But that was something that he identified again. Like, this is people who are being wrongfully put upon by their government, and otherwise they would have nothing with which to fight back, except like traffic cones and umbrellas was like the theme of that revolution. And JStark passed away before he really knew the extent to which FGC-9s are being made and used in Myanmar. And Myanmar being a very different sort of civil unrest, because that's a part of the world that isn't completely flooded by guns. I guess it's got some proximity to Vietnam, and it does have guns that were holdover from the Vietnam War there. But by and large, even the military force is like a hodgepodge of guns from different countries. Like, they are not a well-equipped country when it comes to like having guns spill into there. So the Myanmar rebels have been using FGC-9s in frontline combat, which is kind of interesting in many regards and terrifying in some regards. But certainly, if I can put words in JStark's head, I'm certain he would have been thrilled to see his gun be used to, like, it's a brutal military junta who has bombed civilians, and so I'm sure he would not mind his gun being used to then terrorize the terrorizers.
What are your thoughts? I'm sorry. Before we go too far towards Myanmar, what are your thoughts that the German government either killed JStark outright or had a hand in his death?
I'm not going to comment, and there's a reason I'm not going to comment, and I want to tell you all someday, but I shouldn't.
Fair enough.
I promise it's a good reason, and I'm not just trying to be catty.
There's an interesting parallel to him being a refugee to go to Germany, and then you specifically mentioning disarmed populace, and obviously World War II and all that kind of stuff, like Germany being the place where people were disarmed.
Right.
Like, there's a connection there that I haven't quite made in my head, but there's something there where
almost it's a poetic, maybe not poetic injustice or something.
It's something along those lines, yeah.
Since JStark's passing, I feel that he's been viewed as a martyr for GunCAD, and his following grew exponentially after his passing. Would you agree that's the case as well?
I certainly think so. Certainly people were familiar with them before, and I think the Popular Front documentary really cemented that in a lot of people's minds, that that he stopped being in much the same way after the Makers match, right? That it's like, oh, these aren't just like shady internet nobodies who might actually be government operatives. It's like, oh, this is a real person who believes in real things, and it's not something that you can ignore or like push away because of that. And I think that, I mean, the Popular Front documentary, right? It's edited up and hyped up because that's sort of how you have to sell it, and that's Jake Hanrahan's angle, and I personally do like it. But the sort of things Stark was saying were very, very hard to ignore, and at least coming out of a European's mouth, it doesn't sound right. Of course, he'd grew up most of his life in Europe, so I guess he's Kurdish but grew up in Europe. So I suppose the European system of values had some influence on him, right? And generally speaking, Europeans are not big on the whole, you need a gun to protect yourself from the government because the government will come to shit on you eventually, because that is just what governments tend to do. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was surprising to a lot of people to see those words come out of his mouth, to hear those words come out of his mouth. And so certainly I think a lot of people then, identified with him or sort of saw, and I mean, even Grantham picked up on it, right? After the Popular Front documentary, Grantham was like, holy shit, this dude's fucking cool. Where, he's saying things that you wouldn't think were popular for him, but they sort of resonate with some idea of American spirit or the spirit of freedom or liberty or what have you. And so, people build that like a parasocial connection with them, right? Where they're like, I feel like I'm like, because I identify so strongly with you and I want to like you so much that I feel like we're speaking the same language, or we have something in common, or we have a connection. Mm-hmm. And even if that connection is just imagined, a lot of people felt some level of emotional contact with JStark, or who they thought JStark was, or whatever. And so once everybody found out that JStark had passed, especially, and I know, I'm not trying to be catty, but the circumstances that he had passed in being at least somewhat questionable, people sort of like again latched on to the that idea. And I think it's something that's repeated regardless of what, it doesn't have to be about guns, any sort of community or event or anything in general, where you have somebody who dies fighting for what they believe in. It's just extraordinarily noble. And I know I've seen this talked about on the Popular Front documentary or the Popular Front podcast and stuff, where even where the Kurdish soldiers will say, like, we realize that radical Islamists or ISIS or whatever are our mortal enemy. They want to eliminate us from existing. But when they die on the field of battle, they died fighting for something the same way we die fighting for something. And while they may be the aggressor and we're the one on the back foot, they died fighting for what they believed in. And I think that is a universal language, that it doesn't matter what your culture is or what have you. Essentially every culture that's ever had to, like, from picking up a spear to picking up a rifle to defend yourself or to attack somebody who's wronged you, the notion of dying for something that you believe in becomes something that is righteous in and of itself, especially so whenever you identify with the things that person believed in. And so I think a lot of people saw JStark in the Popular Front documentary, and he says the sort of things that makes your brain do the good chemicals, like, oh, he says he likes guns, that's cool. Oh, he says free speech, that's cool. I like that. I'm an American, that's cool. And if not an American outright, an American at heart. And they sort of latch on to the fact that they think those things are cool. And, they identify with that. And so that when they see that ostensibly, right, the reason he's on any government's radar is because he's doing these sorts of things. By that point, he's effectively given his life, if not committed his life to this course of action. And I don't remember who it was. I think it was one of the fighters in the IRA. It was interviewed at one point, and he was asked about, like, do you care about what happens if you die? And he's like, oh no, I accepted I was going to die a long time ago. The only question is, like, how many more British people I can kill before I die. And while I don't think JStark's goal was killing British people necessarily, I think his idea of freedom or living or whatever it was like, he accepts his fate of, the government is going to come and get me one day eventually, but I'm going to see how much I can improve the state of gun CAD or 3D printed guns, in and of itself before that day eventually happens. And so, eventually that day did happen. And, I mean, I think there is nothing, to more directly answer your question of the increase of his martyrdom or what have you. I think that is more than anything else because of the fact that he ended up giving his life in one way or another, fighting for the thing that he believed in, and it's something that perhaps I've seen some in the printing community who's like, oh, we're supposed to like cops and cops are on our side. Actually, the cops will totally back. They wouldn't enforce a red flag law. They wouldn't do that. And like I've seen some people do that, but I think by and large the community identifies with this like very strong, you own guns because the cops won't be there when you need them, and the cops aren't going to stand up for you whenever the government says you can't leave your house because some people are coughing. The cops aren't going to take your side. They're going to take their paycheck side, because they'd rather take a paycheck than take their boot off your neck. And so I think a lot of people, the community by and large has these ideals and shares these ideals with Stark. And so when they saw him pass fighting for what he believed in, they sort of latched onto it. And so I guess that's the very long form version of my answer as far as like, do I think that he's sort of become a martyr? Yes. But I think sort of by my explanation there, I show my hand in saying that I don't think that's unfair or unexpected, perhaps.
On the topic of JStark, kind of segueing into other icons and media targets, what do you think the future of GunCat is, and specifically in regards to like what the media is going to start targeting next, or like what do you see coming up, and what do you see being a big target?
Right, switches are the hot thing now, full auto conversions, and mostly because, like, I guess the ATF didn't realize how out of control things were until it was like, we have no handle on this situation whatsoever. And so the ATF is massively behind on those, and they've been like working with local media all over the place to try and catch up on that stuff. So the big sort of issues that I see coming forward in the media is some sort of assertion and or allegation that 3D printed stuff in general is just for making machine guns or what have you, because some people have used it to make machine guns, sort of a lump people in thing. And I think in that regard, that I have been vocal in some opposition to some aspects of the gun makers match, right? Mostly just because like people were figuring out how you run a semi-anonymous but not anonymous in an anonymous community version of a gun competition, which just on its own is difficult, certainly. But I think probably like the biggest advantage to the gun makers match is it gives you an easy way to point at and say like, but they didn't print machine guns. Like actually people aren't really printing machine guns. That's something you hear about in a niche number of cases. And so that does make it easier to push back on the vilification, is to have more people doing these sorts of things legally, or even though PSR wears a mask, right? Having a big YouTube audience where you can say like, look, I'm showing a legal, safe way to do this, and I'm not printing a switch. So certainly in that regard, I think that there's an easy counter to that as far as strategy goes going forwards. But as far as what the media will latch on to, at this point, they've latched on to pretty much everything they possibly can. They've talked about, well, it's this easy. It takes 15 minutes. It's everybody does it. And your mom and your grandma's dog and cat's doing it. And, they've said all these sort of things already. And I don't think that it's necessarily had the sort of effect that they wanted it to. And so, where do they pivot from here? Like, well, everyone's printing machine guns. Well, obviously that's not true. And it's, that's one angle they haven't tried, is insisting that everyone just makes machine guns. And I guess the other angle is like, they could come and attack. I don't know if you guys have been up to speed with Suckboy Tony's developments, but he's working on 3D printed caseless ammo, or it's fragmenting caseless ammo. Like they could latch onto that and be like, well, now they're making ammo. But at that point, everybody's going to be like, okay, they weren't printing that the whole time. Will sort of be the public's reaction.
So people are still printing machine guns. They're just taking all their auto sears to gun buybacks.
Right. Yeah, I guess that was going to be my next question is, what do you think about the gun buyback situation that's been happening since Houston?
I like it. So the first documented instance of that happening was actually 2 years ago, where a guy in the low point beta had got a parts kit that had a barrel that was bulged. So I guess somebody did some real hood rat shit with their high point, like stuffing rocks in the barrel or something.
Oh my
god! To make it more effective or whatever. And they bulged the barrel on it, so obviously you can't rebuild it with a bulged barrel. So he took this, 3D printed a slide to put on there, and then took it to a buyback, and he got $100 for it. So I don't even remember which state that was in, but I want to say it was like a state that was like surprising they had a gun buyback. It might have been Texas, but that was the first documented instance of this. And from that point, I thought it was like super cool, right? Because you're like defunding the buybacks, which is nice. And so I know there's been two very high profile instances recently, one with the harlots and one with the baggie full of like the time bag of auto sears.
Yeah.
And I personally think that's great. It very plainly paints the fact that, like, you know, geez, I guess I'm going to sound like a little bit of a lunatic here, but I know about this YouTube show because Floodbusters Matt has been on it a couple of times. But there's a Dr. Rashad Ritchie who's on the Young Turks, has a YouTube show. He's a black guy, very well spoken, but extremely progressive. And being progressive means you're not well spoken. Is that what I just admitted? No, but yes, but no. And he's generally very pro gun control, but the one aspect of gun control he absolutely hates is gun buybacks, because they always put them in a black neighborhood and they're always just trying to take guns from black people, right? They never have a gun buyback in a rich neighborhood or a rich suburb. And the reason why is because they're not concerned about the white people's guns. These big cities, they don't care. They're concerned about a different demographics guns, and that's the ones that they're after getting. And they won't come out and admit it, right? Because they're scared to, but that's what they're doing. So I think gun buybacks on their face. I agree with Dr. Rashad Ritchie 100% in this regard, where that's what gun buybacks are out to do. Is they're out to take guns from the people that the cities deem unworthy of owning guns, or you're too unsafe to own a gun, you who has melanin. And so I like anything that like sort of highlights how bad gun buybacks are. And I know in the past people had just taken like the old Sears shotguns, old Sears break action single barrel shotguns, and they'd taken them to gun buybacks and then went and bought an AR-15 with their 10 break action shotguns. Now, I thought that was cool when that happened. I thought it was cool when the guy turned in the one printed high point. I know there was a guy who turned in a couple of printed Glock frames at one point and managed to make like $150 from turning in a couple of frames. And so, of course, I still think it's awesome when people turn in harlots or a baggie full of auto sears, especially because like they argued with the cops and the cops ended up bending the knee because they're like, but our poster says we'll do it. Like, I think that's great. Like, you hold
the entire police force clock in and scour the city for gift cards.
And they've got to like hold their feet to you're holding the cops' feet to the fire over like their own incredibly misguided, I guess, event. And so I'm 100% in favor of it. And I know some people are like, but it gives us bad attention. Like, does it really though? Like even the people who are like, the people who don't have a dog in this fight look at it and go like, the cops got clowned.
Yeah. Soon they'll just change the rules to, we can no longer accept printed guns. Accepting printed firearms.
That's the gamer strat. This is something that I predicted when we were talking about it. I don't want to say I predicted it, but like the couple of guys I was talking with after that first high point was turned in was, as soon as the cops learn that these are 3D printed, they will stop accepting them, because it's like you're the Cobra economics guy embraced this in his name, but it's like, you're breeding these cobras, we don't want them. Stop it. And so,
but he can't leave with that bag of auto sears, so pay this man.
Right.
My one hesitation on the gun buyback stuff, sticking it to the man is fun and all, but I feel like you have to really take their word on the amnesty thing if you're in a place where you're printing something that's not expressly legal. And unless you're an SOT, all of those fucking auto sears are in that category. So that aspect of like, pitching this as a fun thing to do, there are real legal risks, in my mind at least, for the people going in. Because
there's a real 25-year risks.
Right. It's not that much more work to make 100 harlots. Just come on. So in my area, I thought I had missed the buyback, and as I looked through the details, because there were still a couple areas, hours left in it, it wasn't actually a buyback, it was a disposal. No money offered, gun disposal, also no amnesty. They were going to run the serial numbers before they disposed of the gun to make sure they hadn't been used in any crimes previously.
What if there's no serial number, though?
Just hand it to him and be like, yeah, killed a guy with that this morning. I'll let you guys figure out who it was. Good work, boys. You can have this. Just waste as much of this time as you can. And it's
what's funny about you mentioning
show up
about
with your arm in a cast and be like, yeah, somebody got blown away by this morning. And they're like, oh, really? And they're like, yeah, it was me. Threw my hand up.
So, completely unrelated question. I was talking with someone very randomly the other day about releases that are specifically like technical specs on a particular platform. I remember the catalog did that for they released the AR-15 specs a little while ago, like 2019, something like that. Have you guys done that anymore since then? Is that something people are interested in continuing to do? Was it ultimately useful?
It is, and certainly was useful. So that was actually the first project that I ever worked on in the GunCAD space. It was me and JStark and another guy, and we don't talk about the other guy because it turns out he was actually a real life Fed. Like it ended up turning out that this guy he'd always post pictures of like dropping auto sears, and he posted pictures that he had live grenades. And then one time he mentioned the fact that he was raided and they didn't arrest him. You know what that means. He was like very quietly admitting, I'm an informant, but like he was letting us know as a courtesy, essentially. It was like making it very obvious he was. So we don't talk about him anymore. But he sort of fell off of the, we of course just disassociated ourselves quickly once that became evident. But yeah, we took those CAD specs that Defense Distributed had posted back in 2018 of the AR-15, which was like horribly mismodeled, because it turns out Defense Distributed doesn't actually have anybody that knows CAD really well, and so they hadn't modeled any of that stuff they released. It was all just complete hot garbage from GrabCAD that they released saying it was theirs. Because, like, again, doing work is hard, but taking stuff from GrabCAD and saying it's yours is easy to sell to the media. So that's what they did, was the pretend that they did something and then sell it to the media. And so JStark was upset about the specs being horrible and wrong and being presented as though they were complete. And so we sort of set about fixing them. And so we did. We went through. The upper receiver was modeled by orangutans who didn't know what they were doing. And we got past a full set of prints for the M16A1 that had some A2 prints. And this was something that Picatinny Arsenal in New Jersey had, and somebody managed to FOIA request them. Like they FOIA requested this from some secretary who didn't understand they weren't supposed to give away technical specs on weapons, and they just did it. So, we had the M16A1, A2 prints, and so updated the parts, modeled them from there. There are still quite a few things that are wrong with that model, but it's stuff like in the bolt, there's stuff that's modeled at min tolerance instead of modeled at nominal. Like it's little stuff that geeky CAD guys would geek out about, but otherwise, like you could make a part to it. It would just be a little bit loose on tolerance. So, we released that. And so after we sort of released that along with all of the blueprint plans that we had been passed, a bunch of other people sort of started to reach out to us saying like, I have a bunch of these blueprints too. We want these shared. And so we end up eventually getting those shared as well. And there's plans for like the M13GO, which was like a commander size 1911 in 9mm that was trialed at one point. A full set of blueprints were made for this gun. We have those. Those are up there now. All sorts of things. There's then these print sets just sort of like trickled in. Most of them had been sent to Stark, but a lot of them were sent to me as well. And one guy that we worked with was like, he was like the old school version of a file hoarder. He was like a 2D data sheet hoarder. And he had a contact at, I forget which, it was one of the armories or arsenals here in the US that had a lot of these prints on hand. And the way that the FOIA requests from that arsenal worked is, I guess the guy would play dumb enough that he'd be like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to share those. And for $4 per page, he would scan them over to you in a PDF. That said, like, for any gun, you're going to have at least 100 pages or whatever. So it gets very expensive. And the way the FOIA request works is you would have to know the specific gun and the number it would be filed under. It's like, the M16 is obviously the M16, but there's also an M15 rifle that the Army has. It was a training rifle. You wouldn't be able to say that gun's common name. You wouldn't be able to say like the M14 training rifle. You would have to say the M15 or whatever. So you'd have to know its technical name. So that made the FOIA request difficult for some stuff, because like if you FOIA requested like M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, they'd be charging you like $400, $400, $400, $400, $400 just to find out what that actually was. So that was sort of a risky game there. So we did have some stuff from that guy. And then that guy also had contacts over at the Royal Armories in the UK. England does not have our version of ITAR or whatever. It's ITAR and whatever the other, what EAR is the reason that the military is technically not supposed to be giving you technical specs on its own guns is because of those. It especially hamstrings the military in being able to share technical specs on its own stuff with other people that they can't verify are U.S. persons.
They have like hidden copyrights and hidden patents and stuff that like aren't public.
Well, so the big thing with the M16 prints is like it's covered with trade secrets that Colt has. That Colt has a proprietary information agreement with the government on, but like it's got all of Colt's heat treating specs, that all of Colt's deviations from the mil spec heat treating specs, like how they can do it more betterer and the government's okay with. It's all listed in those sheets. So I'm sure Colt, if Colt wasn't bankrupt, would care. But England doesn't have this. And so through this guy, we were able to get some of those STEN plans, and we were able to get plans for some of the partial plans for the British SMLEs and stuff. But in those archives, they have a full print for the EM2, the British 280 bullpup, beautiful, funky looking gun. And one of these days, we're going to pony up the money to get that full set of prints. But the UK guys want like $10 a page, and the EM2 is like 280 pages. So it's hard to swing $3,000 for a PDF. But at the other end of that, that's all the information you need to make an EM2, which is like for some people, it's a grail gun. I would like to have one, even if I hate bullpups. It's a pretty neat gun.
Oh, so the FAMAS.
The French would certainly not be interested in sharing that, but maybe one day. The French need to have a couple more service rifles after their current 416s, and once they get to the point they think the FAMAS is obsolete.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Royal Armories has lots of data packages, and of course when I spoke with them, they said that you can't call it a data package because it's not a full data package. Because I guess the British have a different definition for that in their Armory 2D print keeping thing, where a data package has other stuff too. Probably information on suppliers, like where they had these parts made and stuff. But because all that was missing from the prints. But the prints had all your tolerancing, all your GD&T. It had the parts as well as heat treating specs. I mean, everything that you'd need to make an EM2. And the Belgians have the FAL in that same way. And the Royal Armories could get the prints for the FAL, but it would be like $15 a page. So all of these prints are out there somewhere. And most of these prints are stuff that you can get your hands on. It's just, it costs a ton of money for something that like most people will just look at and go, that's neat, and then do nothing with.
Precisely.
The probably the most interesting one to me is after World War I, the U.S. realized, like, because the U.S. mobilization in World War I was painfully slow. Like, it took us a long time to actually have troops over there on, in theater. And when they did show up, they were like under equipped, and nobody had ammo or guns that worked. And mostly, like, we didn't have enough guns. We had to borrow guns from the French, which is embarrassing. But after World War I, they realized we need a way to be able to put more guns into production quickly in case we ever have a second World War. And the way they did that is they had a bunch of authors from McGraw-Hill, the publishing company, that went to Springfield Armory and lived there for 9 months. And they documented the entire process from a standpoint of tooling and everything, how you build a 1903 rifle. Every single, like, this is what the clamp looks like to hold the barrel in when you spin the receiver in. This is what the check fixtures to make sure that everything is toleranced correctly looks like. All of this. It's like 600 pages they put in this book. And then they published this book, in very limited circulation, but in the hopes of, if, I guess not hopes, but if World War II kicks off, what they're going to do with this book is send it to every machine shop in the country and be like, make the parts from this that you possibly can. We'll be able to mobilize many more arms in much shorter time this way. And so it was I think that's probably the coolest thing that's on the technical data package collection, because that's not just a technical data package. That's all of the tooling and work holding. And they even talk about like the torque specs that you would have for the tooling for making the gun. Like it's like, of course it took them 9 months to put this together, being professional authors working with professional machinists. But it's sort of like what the FGC-9 documentation was, but for the 1903 rifle. Only, of course, this wasn't meant for you to do it yourself. It was like, step one is go over to your Bridgeport. Well, I don't have one. Step one, go over to your South Bend that's got a 4-foot bed. Don't have one.
You don't have a button rifler?
I don't suppose that I do.
So on that topic, what technical skills and tooling do you think, if you're just starting in GunCAD and you just got your Ender or whatever, like, and you want to expand your skills, what tooling do you think you should lean towards?
I had a YouTube video on this and I took it down. I guess it is still up on my Utreon. If you want to check it up, it's Ivan Prince Guns on Utreon. If any audience member is interested, but I'm going to try and remember what I said in the video. Probably the most important tools that you get first is ball end Allen wrenches. If you're going to build anything that has, cap screws, get a nice set. Like, don't cheap out. Bondus brand is really good. I like them. Project Farm has tested them. They're great. Bondus ball end Allen drivers, a set of metric and imperial. Don't cheap out. Don't buy one wrench at a time. Don't be stupid. Just spend $30 and have them all.
Yeah.
That's step one. That's probably one of the most important tools to have. Another one will be like, I like having a box cutter, but it seems like a lot of people just use like a standard deburring tool, and that's to cut the elephant's brim off of prints. Do not use that to cut supports off of prints, because I've seen multiple people now use that to cut pieces off of hand, which is less than optimal. For getting sticky supports off of a frame, what I recommend is a screwdriver, and you can just use a screwdriver to scrape the supports off the frame. And if it takes more than scraping with the side of a screwdriver, you need to fix your support settings. Just junk the print. We've all had to do it. The supports are too stuck. Just junk it and then start over. The next most important tool will be a Dremel tool with a rotary cutting wheel. Don't buy a Dremel tool that has like a million little accessories and widgets with it. You'll never use the million accessories and widgets. They're all useless. The only accessory that you really, really need is just the grinding disc, because the grinding disc can remove plastic. It can cut screws down to size. You can create pins out of pin stock. It's great. The Dremel tool with the cutting disc is a wonderful, wonderful thing to have. Not a battery operated Dremel either. Don't be stupid. Then a metric and imperial drill index. Don't cheap out. Don't buy one drill bit at a time. Get an entire index of metric and an entire index of imperial drill bits. If you go from like 1 millimeter to 10 millimeter and then 1/16 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch, you'll have all the drill bits you should ever need for your gun stuffing careers. Don't do that weird thing where you like chuck up a pin in a drill and then like heat up the frame by spinning the pin until it goes in. That's stupid. Just buy a drill bit. Drill bits aren't that expensive. Again, like $20 on Amazon for $20 for each index. So $40 for 2 drill indices. And then you'll have all the drill bits you ever need.
And put the drill bits back when you're done.
Yeah, that's why I have 6 drill indices, because I keep losing them. And I just buy a whole new index every time, because more drill bits never hurt anybody. Backups on backups. But then having some sort of a drill to spin the drill industry, or spin the drill bits, very important. I just use a cheap battery Ryobi drill. Whatever works there. You don't need anything impressive, because we're just drilling out holes in plastic for the most part. Yeah, there you go. Ryobi, man. Team Ryobi. Then at that point, I would recommend you get a soldering iron. Soldering iron is by far the most underappreciated tool in all of 3D printing guns. I guess people thought it was a joke, because people were joking about using soldering irons to like fix stuff, but it's not a joke. You can use a soldering iron to fix cracks. You can use a soldering iron to melt plastic back into an area that needs to be a little bit beefed up. You can use soldering irons to smooth out imperfections in a frame. And probably the most common and most useful use is people that don't want to print their Glock frames rails up and insist on printing them rails down so that their parts don't fit in their frame, and then their gun doesn't work, and so they have to post on FOSSCAT about their gun not working.
Wait. Are you a rails up guy?
for frames that were specifically designed rails up, if you're going to print them rails down, you shouldn't then post about why didn't my gun work. It's like the door says don't slam your dick in the door, and you slam your dick in the door, and then you go on the internet and you're like, why does the door hurt my dick? It's not fair. What did I do wrong? Like, come on, the door says don't do it. Like there are certainly frames that were designed to print rails down and will print rails down okay. But generally speaking, when I design handgun frames, I designed them for rails up specifically because if your support settings are anything less than perfect, you're going to have some variability on the inside geometry of your frame. And as a result of that, sometimes you're going to have parts that don't fit. And there's nothing more frustrating than having a print that is otherwise perfect, but for the internal pockets and all of your parts working fine. And I've seen people who have taken Dremel tools to Glock frame rails and like the inside rails on the slide. Like people have dremeled out Glock slides to try and make it fit on the, oh God, it's painful to see. Like people will like butcher stuff just because like reading the directions might save you $300. That's no fun. It takes 15 minutes. My time is worth $1,200 an hour, evidently. And so
how are us plebes going to get internet clout though if we don't have perfect prints on our outsides of our frames?
Well, see, that's where the soldering iron comes in. So like people will complain with the Glock frame prints, like, well, my sensitive little paws, they get all scruffed up by the frame where it's a little bit rough and it hurts my little paws. My dainty little lady hands get scruffed.
Okay, that is one of my favorites. The nylon is, I don't like the glass filled nylon because it's rough on my hands.
Right. And so what you can do is take a soldering iron and use that soldering iron to melt and smooth out the bottom of the frame. Now, if you have like manly hands that have become sort of immune to soldering iron heat because you're dumb with soldering irons like me, then what you can do is heat up those areas of the frame and then just grab it. And while it will be intensely painfully hot, you will get it to sort of like contour ever so slightly to your hand, and it will make it extremely comfortable, and you'll never complain about your poor little paws ever being scruffed up by the little frame. Little frame won't scruff up your little lady paws. But the soldering iron is unironically, in all seriousness, a very, very useful tool for anywhere where support material was touching on the outside of something. You can easily smooth it out to get like a mirror finish. And the advantage of this versus like, I know some people sand on it to solve that. Sanding on it is just like removing material to sort of make it a little bit smoother. When you do it with a soldering iron, you're melting that material back together, which makes it stronger. It makes it less prone to failure and makes it smooth and nice and pretty. So a soldering iron is like, yeah, I guess it's like a video game. I'm going to do a video game reference. Ready? Like whenever you buy a soldering iron for 3D printed guns and you understand how to use it, it's like having a mod menu in Call of Duty. Like you get to do the ridiculous bullshit that everybody else wishes they do. Like, okay, yeah, you're flying around and have a fully automatic infinite ammo grenade launcher. Like people wish they could be able to do that. Like you can absolutely suck at Call of Duty and or printing guns. And having a soldering iron will let you get away with just absolute dog shit support settings. You don't need good support settings. Just clean it up with a soldering iron. You can have guns that have like actually broken and or been cracked. Just stick your soldering iron into it and melt it back together. It'll be fine. Like the soldering iron is like it's like the necromancy and or dark arts. Like it's the forbidden magic of 3D printed guns. Like you shouldn't be able to get away with all this, and yet you can. So I'm as far as like people always ask like what soldering iron to buy, because you can spend a lot of money on a soldering iron online, but you should just buy like the cheapest $10 soldering iron Amazon sells, and you should never use those soldering irons for soldering because like they come out of the box shorted out, and so if you put that on a circuit board, it'll like make the circuit board do funny things. Like you'll go to solder a contact on a circuit board, and the lights on the circuit board come on, and you go and then the lights go off, and you go oh,
and you smell that special smoke.
Yeah, the special smoke gets let out, and then you can't get it back in. But don't use these for anything important. But these cheap $10 soldering irons that come out of the box shorted out are perfect for your frames because, like, of course, you're not going to short yourself or shock yourself off of the frame. So you can go crazy. I'm trying to think. I think that might be it for like my top tools to have.
Okay. So I think we're we're running out of time again today, in part because I have to pee very badly. So, is there anything else you want to chat about right now, or is that it for today?
I think that about gets me. I don't know if anybody.
Do you want to talk about your Utreon channel?
Oh, I guess I've got a channel on Utreon. I like Utreon a lot. I've spoke with the guys behind it a little bit, and they're level headed, and they don't. Even though I think one of them's Canadian, they don't like hate guns, which is cool. And so they like guns, and that's cool. I mean, they're not like gun people. I don't want to say that they're gun people and like get them in trouble with anyone, but they don't hate guns, which makes them like guns in comparison to YouTube.
Right.
So they welcome gun content on their stuff, and very, very, very early on in Utreon's involvement, Othias from CN Arsenal was plugged in with them, and of course he runs a channel that's run afoul of YouTube's terms of service because they shot a Lewis gun, and that's a machine gun, and YouTube's worried about people learning how to use a World War I era machine guns that regularly sell for $50,000. You know, somebody might spend $50,000 on a Lewis gun and do something bad with it. I don't know, but like he's run into trouble there before, and so Utreon worked. Othias did a lot of. We owe him our thanks because he did a lot of that onboarding, and like he answered he told Utreon what they needed to make it enticing and or welcoming to gun content creators, and sort of worked with them in that regard. So Othias sort of pioneered that there. So Othias was actually the one who encouraged me to get a Utreon, and so mine is Ivan Prince Guns on Utreon. It mostly just mirrors my YouTube content. I've gotten, I don't know if I think I'm on 2 strikes on YouTube now. I'm about to go to the club. I'm about to go away forever. They're gonna lock me up for good. But I'll always be on Utreon. Certainly, as soon as my YouTube goes down, I will just upload directly to Utreon. But you can also support financially on Utreon the same way you can for this show. It's like Patreon, where it's got subscriptions, only they take much less of a cut than Patreon does, which is cool. And so Utreon really is a pretty wonderful place.
Yeah.
And by now they've got all the bugs smoothed out now, where like you can stream videos in high quality and it doesn't buffer constantly, and like it's fully fledged and it works great.
They were extremely helpful this week getting us set up to stream here. We messaged them. They said, yeah, you're welcome to stream here. We ran into some issues during testing, which were ultimately self-inflicted, and they helped us work it out. Yeah, honestly, so far Utreon has been just completely different in terms of vibe than YouTube. Oh, yeah. Just complete radio silence about why they're fucking kicking us in the nuts.
Yep. And it's because YouTube can get away with it.
So with that, I'm going to end the stream. I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.
Peace.
See you.
Hell yeah, dude.